Welcome back. Last time we went over how I design a character, and today we'll jump into Maya to do UVs and prep the character for textures. Maya is a 3D software package used for visual effects. So it's like you can create environments, assets, effects like water, smoke, fire. We're gonna do a couple things. We're gonna use it to set a few things up for texture, like creating UVs. And we're also gonna use it later on to do some rendering and some lighting effects. So look deving the character to make it feel like it fits naturally into a real world environment. Right now, I have a group of OBJs which build my character model, and I'm taking them and creating basically a origami version of this model. So say you had a box, you would cut the seams at the edge of the box to lay it out flat when you wanted to break it down and recycle it. Or this in the digital world is how you would apply a texture or color to a character or object. So yeah, I guess the origami is like the best way I possibly could explain it. It's a bit more complicated than that, but yeah, it's at its root, it's like you're laying out a 3D object flat in order to apply textures and materials. This part is like when you have a drink and make phone calls while you're doing it, at least for me, because it's like you can just cruise through. It doesn't take a whole lot of like special thought process. Yeah, it's like you go through the motion, you go through the steps. This is like the relaxing part after you put in all the hard work of like creating this detailed creation, and now you just unwrap it, take your time, make sure you're doing it correctly, make sure there's no stretching in areas when you apply the texture, and then yeah. To break it down again, I would just go through each individual part of my model and create seam lines and lay out its UVs, and you can watch it in time lapse, and we'll get into texturing. I'm still in ZBrush doing a quick poly paint. So like I create a cube and I subdivide it several times, and then I find a reference image of a bug that I liked, and I just like stamped it onto that cube, and I just keep it up to like color pick or like make sure I'm like staying in the realm of like the bug that I chose. It's just reference, it could be anything. It just helps me stay on track. And then I'm taking the model and using various masks through the mask editor in ZBrush, and I take the standard brush, maybe throw on an alpha or two, and I just go with the colors and the range of how the mask is working, and paint in the colors where I think they should be. Like the dark crevices are usually darker, not always, and yeah, just to give it a little bit of contrast. I usually think like a miniature model painter, because I did that for a while. Yeah, so I typically think about that workflow when I'm in ZBrush, because it just helps me out, and I treat it as a digital process of miniature making for some of my characters as a base diffuse texture. So it's like, start with this layer, dark color, so it's like overall dark in the crevices, and then I mask those crevices, and then I paint a lighter color, the broader strokes, and then I get lighter and lighter, and then I wash it sometimes with like a color that is complementary to the main color that I'm using to give it some pop. because not everything's flat color. Well, really nothing is just a flat color. So yeah, like keeping that all in mind, I'm texturing this character using poly paint, but this is just the beginning of it. Typically, you would take this this diffuse map that you made with all your other maps that are exported from out of ZBrush, like your normal map and your 32-bit displacements, to be plugged into Maya when you're doing the look dev part of this process. Yeah, you can take your diffuse and your normal into Substance, and that's gonna be handy for when you're baking your maps, and just a good starting point to start in Substance. So we've created our character asset, and we've took the low-res subdivision into Maya to add UVs. And now we're going to take that UV'd model and take it into Substance to add textures and materials. So Substance Painter is a 3D software application where you apply textures and materials to VFX assets, from like environment props like a table or a chair, or it could be like a character or a creature with like skin and pores. It's like very, very good. It creates not only like a diffuse color, but materials like gloss and specular. So like if you want something to look more wet or like glossy, you can adjust that very quickly in Substance, and or even hand painted. Yeah, it's just overall strong texturing package that I think like a lot of people are using right now. It's a very standard. Yeah, here is basically, I'm just trying to like figure out the character's overall material. I knew I was okay with the colors, primarily from the base textures from ZBrush, to keep it quick and simple. And here I was just finessing that, adding like a little bit of breakup here and there, and some subsurface, and then some like specular change, and the hard shelled parts versus like his like wrinkly skin that's a little softer under it. So I played with how that would feel. It'd be hard to tell, but he's like a bit more glossy on his like exoskeleton parts than his skin, like the wrinkly skin in between the hard parts. Yeah. So that was like the main thing I established here for this one, and playing with some different materials for his base, but I ended up omitting the base for the final render because he just felt better on flat ground. Now that we have our finished character model, we can take that and jump into Maya and add some look dev lighting.